So I'm excited to be with you today and to share a little bit about my career and also about my faith along the way, because obviously they're very intertwined, which is why this organization's here, right? I mean, our day-to-day lives definitely impact our careers every day, and hopefully I'll give you a couple of seeds and some inspiration along the way. So I do have some handouts for you, so I'll direct you to that first. And so one is, it has my resume at the start. It looks like this. So the first 2 pages are basically my resume. And the reason why I'm giving that to you is because later on, if you don't remember exactly what my background was and you're looking at a certain job or there's something that you're wanting to learn more about, perhaps it'll jog your memory and I can give you some advice about that. I'll be glad to do that later on from a career perspective. So that's why I give you my full resume, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Also, some notes for the presentation. So you'll see on page 3 and then on page 4. So I draw your attention to page 3 about discerning your vocation and your mission life, because I'm going to talk about that while I talk through my career. It's really important that you really discern what your gifts are. I mean, I think it's very important for you to understand, especially at this point in your life, that the Holy Spirit gave you specific gifts, just you, and that those are to be given to the rest of the world to serve other people. And during the talk, hopefully you'll see that I've been trying to put some of my gifts to use. About 3 years ago, I had a little bit of a crisis on whether to stay in business or to go work for the church. And it's by discerning those gifts that I am where I am today from an executive perspective. It's because the leadership and the administration gifts that I've been given from the Holy Spirit, I have a responsibility to give those back to the world. And each of you have a gift that only you give to the world. So really take that to heart. And are you in the place where you need to be to serve the world in the most dramatic way that the Holy Spirit has asked you to do that? So that's why I start with incorporating your faith in your work life. And then on page 4, I go through the steps of conversion. You're going to hear a little bit about my conversion along the way. As Ken said, I'm a convert, so I was raised Southern Baptist, evangelical, and mostly raised in San Antonio, but we moved back and forth. I was a military brat. And so being a convert to the Catholic faith, there was actually a pretty dramatic conversion for me, because I felt like I had been lied to for most of my life when I learned the history of the church. So I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. And I think it's important to kind of look and see where you are spiritually, where are you in the conversion path, and have you really dropped your nets? Have you really made the decision to follow Jesus and to really use your gifts? You have to ask yourself that question. It's a great time to do it. This is Advent, right? Where the church gives us an opportunity to reflect upon what we are doing in our day-to-day lives and really take a pause and grow a little bit more through this Advent. So hopefully you'll take a couple of notes and then I'll challenge you in a couple of minutes. So as I said, I'm a convert, so I was raised Southern Baptist, evangelical, church-going, youth groups, all of that while I was growing up. And went to nursing school, so went to UT Health Science Center right here in San Antonio. And actually, during going to school, and I'll ask for a show of hands, how many of you know someone that's had an abortion? So probably about 50% of you. So after tonight, all of you will be raising your hand, because I had 19 while I was in nursing school, I had an abortion. I'm going to tell you a whole lot about that. I'll be glad to tell you my story another time as well. I think it's important for you to understand that, along your spiritual path, there's things that happen that will direct you later, because some of the projects that I became involved in San Antonio Coalition for Life, Kelly, the executive director, is here tonight. I co-founded San Antonio Coalition for Life later on, much because a push from my husband and a push from Amy Voorhees, but obviously my past and wanting to make sure that I ministered to those women that were going through abortion. It's an important part to reach out. So I went to nursing school, became a pediatric intensive care nurse, and thought, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I thought I was going to be a jet nurse and stay in ICU and treat the kids. And actually, the ICU is a very intense place. It's somewhere where put your faith in the balance too, because we would have Australian and New Zealand nurses that would come over and even challenge our United States medical care that we were giving to some of these kids that had like spina bifida and heart conditions. So, I was going to the Methodist church at this point. I wasn't a Catholic yet, but I was having to defend what we were doing in the United States as far as taking some of the care of the disabled kids that some of the people around the world don't take care of. So it started in the ICU. You would think that nurses are for life, right? Now, it was a battlefield there as well. So I moved on and I went to work in home health nursing. And this is where I started getting a little taste of something else that I enjoyed doing in my career, and that was business. I actually started leading a team of about 20 nurses. I also had the marketing team that I had. And along the way, I really picked up a lot about the insurances and the different pieces of business. I was like, this is interesting. And then my friend sold the business to Tenant, which is a big medical company that I really didn't want to work for. And so I started looking for a job. And God always puts his hands in places and directs you where he wants you to go. At this point, believe it or not, there was too many nurses on the market, which, by the way, that never happens. And so my resume kept on ending up in sales offices, and so I decided, I'm supposed to be in business. I guess that's where I'm supposed to be. So I went to work for a small durable medical equipment company doing sales, and I was their /nurse. And about this time as well, Jeff's dad died. My husband, who's back there, we've been married for 20 years. Very proud of that and very lucky to be married to Jeff. And about this time, Jeff's dad died. It was in 1998. And we had a crisis of faith because I was sitting next to Jeff at his dad's funeral mass, and he was definitely not, he wasn't able to go to receive the Eucharist, and I was sitting there watching my husband really upset about where he was from a faith perspective. And so while I'm making this transition in my career, we're also having other transitions from a spiritual perspective. So a lot of prayer, and then Jeff decides that he wants to go back to the Catholic Church after his brother, who's also here, gave him an inclination about Our Lady of the Atonement. And Jeff had decided that he was going to go to Mass one day, and I was not going to Mass with him, and I was not going to become Catholic. So, and the whole finger was going and everything. Right, honey? Yeah. So, and he couldn't find the church, because this was before MapQuest and Google Maps, okay? So he comes back, he couldn't find the church, and I'm the navigator usually, and being the analytical one. And so the next week we go, and remember the career stuff's going on. I've got a great job in sales now. I'm kind of starting to get my groove on from a business perspective. I'm like, you know what? I can mix clinical with business, and the spiritual stuff is going on too. And so we go, and I go, and Deacon Orr, if any of you have gone to Our Lady of the Atonement, Deacon Orr is pretty outspoken, kind of like a Southern Baptist preacher at times. And he was talking through some of the Catholic doctrine, basically, which I had never heard before in my life. And if I had been in the Southern Baptist church, I'd been like, amen, brother. And it was a very reverent mass, which I'd never seen before either. So I thought, okay, this Catholic thing is interesting. And so about 3 weeks in from that, we go back, so I keep going with Jeff, even though I'm never going to become Catholic, right? God has a funny way of changing things. So about 3 weeks pass, and I'm reading the bulletin of Our Lady of the Atonement, and it says, pharmacist, remember I'm a nurse, who's an ex-Southern Baptist, teaches inquiry class. If you want to know more about the Catholic faith, come on, I think it was a Wednesday at that point. And of course, what I told Jeff, I was like, Jeff, you need to go to this class so you can learn about this Catholic faith that you want to know so much about. And he gave it right back to me. He's like, yeah, you just want to go to the class. So I got to the class, and we were going through the classes. I thought it was interesting. But about 3 weeks in, another 3 weeks, the history of the church comes into play. And I'm like, St. Paul was Catholic? All right, St. Augustine was Catholic? You're joking, right? Yeah, and Roger is, I'm pretty animated, so I could get pretty assertive, and I was like, Roger, no, really? St. Paul was Catholic. St. Augustine was Catholic? St. Clement was Catholic? All the fathers of the church that Protestants talk about are Catholic. So, of course, I'm like, I've been lied to all my life, I don't appreciate this. And obviously, the history of the church really converted me. So, at the same time, the company that I was working for at the time, I was starting to do contracts, and I was actually starting to get onto the legal and the contracting, writing multi-million-dollar contracts for the sales job that I was in at this point. It was a really good experience while all this spiritual stuff was going on. And so the job that I was in, the company was going bankrupt. And at that point, I decided to go ahead and look for a new job. And at this point, this is when you actually look for jobs in the newspaper. This was a long time ago. And Jeff found a job in a job fair. And so I went to go to this job fair. There was like 100 people there for this one job at Abbott Pharmaceuticals. Has anyone heard of Abbott before? So it's a very good AbbVie. Abbott is a very good company. And I was going for what was called a managed care specialist role at this point. And this is basically calling on managed care companies and selling the products so that they can help their patients with whatever product it was. So Abbott had 8 products. So it's kind of interesting because I was going through the spiritual stuff, growing in my career, and I walked into this room, and there was probably maybe 2 other women there. There was, 98 men and 2 women that were interviewing for this one job. And so I was like, it's starting to get very interesting from a business perspective that it's mostly men that were going up against. And most of them looked like they were like 6'4" to me. I'm 5'3", so they're pretty good too. So I interviewed for the job, got the job at Abbott, and at the same time, I come into the Catholic Church. So it was one Saturday, David and Tricia were there, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, my husband and my mother-in-law, and we came into the church. And obviously Jeff's dad had started praying for us the minute that he passed away. So I was very blessed to come into church. We got married in the church. And then, guess who my confirmation saint was? Who was that? St. Augustine. I didn't know as a woman I was supposed to pick a woman, but St. Augustine, if you think about it, he was a prodigal son, right? As far as coming, St. Monica prayed for him and prayed for him. I found out later that I had lots of people praying for me to become Catholic, even though I was never going to become Catholic. So St. Augustine was a very proper choice for me. He obviously shacked up with his girlfriend, he got her pregnant, St. Monica kept praying. This is the 4th century. You think this is like the modern time, right? So it was very proper. So it was interesting because at Abbott, as I'm confirmed in the Catholic Church, I also get a very good leader who is a Christian. His name is Big Jimmy, and he was a pharmacist by training. He's my regional director, and he develops me from a leadership perspective and starts giving me clues into what I believe are my charisms from the Holy Spirit around leadership and around administration. And so Jim really influences me and takes really good care of me, and within Abbott, if you did well, you would get promoted every 18 months. And so within 18 months, I was promoted to a district manager job. And so this is people management. This is the first time I've done people management in like a big business, in a big corporate environment. And so I had 10 to 12 direct reports, and I got another really good regional manager whose name was Ken McDonald, and he was Catholic. So Jim had been Catholic, although a very good Christian man, a very good leader, but Ken was Catholic. And it was very interesting to watch Ken. What I would say to you is, especially if you start leading people or just in your day-to-day work, don't dismiss the little things that you can do. Because one of the rules that Ken had, which I still use today, is the $5 rule for cussing. So basically, I learned from Ken, he didn't tolerate cussing around him. He didn't think it was appropriate. He thought it was vile. And so he was like, listen, I'll give $5 to charity if you cuss around me. So everybody thinks it's my rule today, but it came from Ken McDonald. It was just a slight thing. He set limits for folks. And I would say that it also evangelized people. To realize that Ken was, he was Christian and he was a Catholic, and he respected that. And then Ken also showed the care from a leadership perspective, and the fact that everyone has a place in the world, right? And some people need to be developed where they're at. You need to grow them as a people leader. And then some people need to go on to another job because it's the best for them, right? So as a people leader, you have to either help people grow in their job, or you have to tell them this is not the right job for you and you need to go find another job. Either of those stories, you're doing the best thing for the human person, right? You're not doing the best thing for someone if you're not honest with them in a charitable way by letting them continue to do a job that's not going to do well. So I learned a lot from Ken in my first people management job. And then I went into marketing. So is anybody in marketing out there? Yeah, a couple people. So this is a first big marketing job, $100 million budget, pretty big job. And I'll have to say, like, every time I get a big job, I always look at Jeff and I'm like, I'm never going to be able to do this job. This job is this is too big, I'm not going to be able to do this. Whenever you're having self-doubt, say some prayers. Obviously, talk to your significant other or good friend. God's putting you in places so that you can grow and develop. So I went into the marketing job, and at this point, we actually moved to Chicago. And this ties into some of the challenges that I'm going to give you. Because the church gives us Advent and Lent every year to take a pause, and we're in the middle of Advent right now. And what I would say is when Jeff and I moved from San Antonio to Chicago with Abbott for my marketing job, and then I ended up in the sales training job, we really took Lent and Advent very seriously. And I would say this, I dropped my net. I really decided to follow Jesus when I became a Catholic. And then Lent and Advent have helped every single year. So it's in Chicago where we decided one Lent that we were going to start going to daily Mass. And I'll tell you what, there's something about the strength that you get from going to see Jesus every day. Where's the closest place to heaven that you can be on earth? The Mass, right? That's Jesus. He's with all the saints. He's with my baby girl that I aborted, Cecilia, right? He comes to us fully human, alive. He gives you the graces that you need in every day. So my strength is from there, and I'll say that that's been one of my number one evangelization tools, because I can't tell you how many meetings I deflect because I'm going to 7 a.m. Mass, telling people, you know what, no, I have another obligation at that time. And they're like, really? Yeah, I have another obligation, I go to Mass. They're like, why? What? Why do you go to Mass? Every day? What's wrong with you? So, and I mean, whether they're Catholic or not, they're like, you go to church every day? It gives you an opportunity to evangelize, but it also gives me the strength that I need. Not everybody needs that every single day, but I mean, I don't know. Jesus is there. I think that we should go see him. So we started going to daily Mass. We started saying the Rosary as well. Hopefully you have a prayer time that you do every day, but I would definitely stress the Rosary and the benefits that you can get from offering intentions for the Rosary as well. So the time in Chicago was very well spent from that perspective. And then we had a family crisis, and my 18-month-old nephew died of meningitis, and the family needed us back here. And this is a time where, I would say that you have to make decisions in life about family and faith, and make those decisions that are going to put you right with your faith and your family. We decided to move back to San Antonio. It wasn't the best thing for my career. It was probably not the best thing for Jeff's career either. But we needed to come back and be part of our family and make sure that my brother and my other nephews and nieces and my family was going to be okay and that we'd be part of this. And obviously come back to the parish that we love very much. So make sure you really take those decisions seriously. And I'll say from San Antonio, Texas, after making that decision, I've been able to still grow my career. And I basically hold an executive position today from San Antonio, Texas, that's supposed to be based in New Jersey. But I've taken a stand. I've decided who I am as a person. I'm someone that wants to be around my family. I'm someone who wants to be able to practice my faith. And I want to be part of the community here in San Antonio. I'm willing to travel 80% of the time to be able to do that from here. And if you grow and develop and take if you take the right steps and you produce for the companies, then you'll be able to do those kind of things. But you got to take a stand when it comes down to making sure that you're taking care of your family as well. So we moved back, and obviously that was a very important part of being close to the family. And then from there, I worked for Novartis on a launch of a $2 billion product. And then I was able to work with a team to develop an entire new business unit within Novartis. And so I lead a team of nurses now who take care of patients who have MS and are starting on a new product that we're working on. So it's a $2 billion product. It's, very serious revenue for the company, but very serious for patient lives as well. And every day, I work with different people that aren't Catholic and they need to be evangelized. And Kim mentioned about the same-sex attraction. It's obviously very common in corporate America. And I recently had one of my direct reports. He's actually reported to me in some function, whether directly or now he's a couple layers down from me. He's reported to me for 5 years. And when he first found out that I was going to be his boss 5 years ago, he looked me up on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the normal places that you look people up and found out that I was an Orthodox Catholic, practicing Catholic. And he shared with me later, he's like, Amber, I thought for sure that you were not going to treat me fairly at all. It's the same-sex attraction now, Catholic's not going to treat me fairly because you obviously proved me very wrong. You're the person that's helped me grow the most, have been the most honest with me, and showed me how to actually act within a corporate environment. So, and I didn't know any of this was going on in his brain. I had no idea. I treated him like anybody else. I treated him as a human being he should be. He had great talents to give to the world. He has talents that the Holy Spirit gave to him as well that only he can give to the world. Whether or not he's using them correctly or not, right? I can guide him on that path. So that's an example of where the faith comes in day-to-day life and you don't realize it through your impact. Another example I'll say to you is that, there are so many women and men and families that have been impacted by abortion, is that day-to-day, there's things that happen. Like I had a friend who recently, her cousin lost a baby, and then she found out another cousin had had an abortion, and it was just tearing her apart at work, and she just shared this with me, and I was able to get them to Project Rachel, which is an organization that helps women that are post-aborted, and then also helps women that are in families that have gone through miscarriage as well. But that impact on her family, she actually started going to Mass again. She went to confession. We were at a national meeting and she said, hey, are you going to go to Mass? I actually need to go to confession. I'm going to go to Mass again. But just being charitable and listening to her and then helping her with a resource is another way to go. So even though my day-to-day job is handling this $2 billion product and managing almost 100 people and working through the day-to-day business, your impact that you have, your faith, is really important to take those steps. I think of anything else that I'm going to share. And we'll have some questions for sure. I think that this is the other thing I'd stress too is if you haven't done a pilgrimage before, has anyone been to the Holy Land? Yeah. Was it remarkable? Yeah. How about to Rome? Yeah, lots more hands for that. I would say, so 2007, we went on our first pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And in 2009, we went to the Holy Land. And then in 2011, we went to Rome. So going to the places where Jesus walked, somewhere that's 4,000 years old, is like something else. That is remarkable, and the history of the church is definitely, how am I doing on time? I'm doing good. All right. So the history of the church is obviously very important. So if you haven't done a pilgrimage, I would challenge you to do that as well. And then the other thing I didn't talk about, and maybe this is important to tell you guys, is about when I got involved in the pro-life movement. So it was during the transition when I came back to San Antonio. We were at LA the Atonement, and in 2007, there was no pro-life community here whatsoever from an organized approach. So Amy Voorhees was the first one to bring 40 Days for Life, and she was at our parish. And so Jeff actually coaxed me. He's like, we just can go out there for 1 hour on one Saturday, and we can, obviously stand up for life. And from there, during that 40 Days for Life, we didn't leave after that. It was like every day we were out there for an hour. So we kind of got addicted to it. And then we saw saves, obviously. I had an abortion, so I could talk to the women and say, I understand exactly where you are from a regret perspective. So at the end of that 40 Days for Life in 2007, at our kitchen table, Amy and I basically talked with George and Jeff, and we formed the San Antonio Coalition for Life, which is still in existence today, and you have probably heard about it. We've had 40 Days for Life now, something like that. And then obviously with the new Planned Parenthood opening here, have done a lot of work with that. Now Kelly is the executive director. So that's just a seed of, the good that came from something that I did earlier in my life, and just following what I feel like was my faith and putting it into action. And then about 3 years ago, I mentioned it a little bit ago, I was at this transition of moving into this executive role, and I thought about actually leaving business. And it was a little bit of a crisis, and one of the other things I'll challenge you to do is to come to the Called and Gifted workshop. There's a flyer that I passed out. So one Advent, Advent and Lent are a great time to take a pause, and one Advent I listened to all of the sessions around the Called and Gifted workshop. And basically what it does is it takes you through to identify your gifts. Remember those gifts I talked about that only you give to the world? I was having a little bit of a crisis about what is exactly the gifts that I give to the world. Am I in the right place? If, in business, is this the right place for me to be? Or should I just be working for the church somewhere? I should work for a charity somewhere. I wanted to make sure I was in the right place. So I went through this by myself during Advent, and I learned that actually I was probably in the right place because I have a leadership and an administration, plus a giving charism that very much comes through in the people leadership part of things. But it took me about a year to 18 months to discern. So what I'd say is I know that, a lot of the time that you spend together here is about talking about vocation and your mission and going out into the world and discerning what you really want to do. This Called and Gifted workshop, going through what exactly your charisms are, would be an important step in that. But it happens through your life if you don't really understand what your gifts are. I had gone up through my career over 20 years very quickly and had been able to make the decisions. I wish I had known 20 years ago what my charisms were. I know that the path would have been too much different because God's hand obviously guided me along the way, whether I wanted to know as I look back. But knowing earlier in life, I think would have been helpful in some of maybe the decisions I would take. I don't think I would have ever become an individual contributor. Some of my jobs, I didn't lead people, and that's actually not good for me. That's not what my charism is. I have a leadership and an administration charism that means that I'm going to likely be in a people leadership role, and that's where I'm supposed to be here. So I'd encourage you to come to that, and I think it was very dramatic for me, and actually I worked with an executive coach as well, there's a link in the paperwork that I'll talk to you about. His name's Nick Simcoe, and he's Careers Through Faith, that I worked with, and the charisms were something that even now he uses with some of his executives as well. So let me put my challenges out there for you after having listened to this. So let's go to page number 5. Here's my challenges for you guys, especially for Amber. So start reading the book Forming Intentional Disciples. So this is the the book that kind of goes through the conversion and how to, from a conversion perspective, really assess where you are from a spiritual journey perspective. And have you really dropped your net? So dropping your net means that you made a conscious commitment to Jesus, that you are going to be an obedient disciple. That's what dropping your net means, right? Like St. Peter and St. Andrew, we just had his feast day. They dropped their nets, right? They left their nets and they followed Jesus. So do an assessment of where you are from a spiritual journey perspective. And then on page number 7 and 8, also do an assessment of where you are from as far as defining your success. Are you at a success level 1 where it's pleasures and possessions that you're really after in your career? Or are you at a success level number 4 where you're surrendering to God? And then on page 8, happiness. There's all these books out there these days about happiness. We have what it takes for happiness. The Catholic Church and following Jesus. We have it. Again, do an assessment of where you are from a happiness level. Are you in ego gratification still? Or you have faith in God's unconditional love? Can I get your commitment? Because you're going to take some time to do those things? Okay, I'm not believing you. Because I have the microphone, Okay. Secondly, make the most of Advent. Did you hear the theme about Advent and Lent? Can I talk to you guys about? I can't tell you being a convert, like how powerful these pauses that the church gives you to reflect. Use them wisely. So here's my Mass challenge for you. So you go to Mass on Sundays, right? How about another day during the week? You pick a day and go to Mass. The morning, the evening, there's Masses all over San Antonio. And so I gave you masstimes.org or Mass in the Mass readings on Laudate app. So there's a Mass that you can go to, believe me. It doesn't matter what your work schedule is. There's 6 a.m. at St. Matthew's. There's 5:15. So there's lots of places to go. Also, the daily examination of conscience. So I put actually an examination of conscience in here on pages 9 and 10. And it says for students, it's from Focus, actually, Fellowship of Christian University students. But I would say, like, I'm still a student in this faith. I think all of us are students, right? So this is one of the better examinations of conscience that I've seen. So really think about, can you take some time each day to maybe even just go through one of the deadly sins and evaluate, how did you do today on that? Make it a practice, because it'll help you be better tomorrow. Can you do that? I hear a big yes. All right, and then obviously, your examination of conscience. You want to make sure you go to confession at least one time per month. And then pray. If it's a rosary, there's lots of apps for that. You guys probably have them on your phone. Also, educate yourself. And here's how I'll point out some really good resources on page 6. I gave you guys a resource page. So we have the Mother Americas Institute that's sponsoring Called and Gifted. And actually, David Delaney is the executive director. He's back there. He's got some great educational resources that are on there. I would suggest Made for Communion. That's a really good review of the Catholic faith. And then I put some books on here that have been really impactful to me from a Catholic perspective, like the 7 Secrets of the Eucharist and 7 Secrets of the Confession. And then obviously, I think most of you probably know Scott Hahn. So pick something to study and read. And then our Father Christopher Phillips, he's actually doing a Bible study on St. Mark. If you haven't really studied St. Mark before, it's up on YouTube. I gave you the link. You can listen to it in your car or on your phone and learn a little bit more about St. Mark. And then I mentioned Nick and Careers Through Faith. If you're really having a crisis on your your vocation and if you're in the right job or not, and you really need to get quick answers, Nick and his team actually do coaching from that perspective. I'm glad to also talk to you because I've had so many different types of jobs. Usually I know someone who has the job that you're looking at or can relate to the job that you're looking for. So, but I would encourage you to come to the Called and Gifted workshop because that will help you discern your gifts as well, that we're going to have it in April. And then lastly, so on the 3rd, so you make the most of Advent? Yes. Not convinced. Yes. Can you make the most of Advent? Yes. All right, so 3rd, attend the Called and Gifted workshop. Did you see the flyer? All right, so this is in April. It's a little ways out, so you have a little bit of time, but you can still sign up tonight. Just go to you can buy tickets, it's all set up. So remember I told you about the charisms, the little workshop I did by myself. So I did this on planes and trains and automobiles during all my flights. But this will be a great workshop for you to come to really understand what is it that the Holy Spirit gave you. The fire that you have that you're bringing into the world, right? The Holy Spirit gave you these gifts. And what are they specifically so that you know that you're on the right path, that you're working for the right vocation, that you've got the right mission in life. So that's what this workshop is going to be about. I really encourage you to sign up for it. And it made a dramatic impact for me. Like I said, I mean, if I wasn't married, I told Kim the other night, like, if I wasn't married 3 years ago when I had this little business crisis, I may have gone and joined the Sisters of Charity or something. I mean, I didn't know exactly what my gifts were that I was bringing to the world. I just knew that I needed to do something for the Catholic faith. And I didn't feel like I was having as big of an impact. But today, I know what my charisms are and that impact that I'm having every day. And then it's being revealed to me more abundantly now that I know, right? I'm touching someone who, had an abortion, or touching someone that hasn't gone to Mass in a long time, and they come along with me to Mass now because they know that I'm going to go when we're on a business trip. So those kind of things just mean so much more to me now that I know what my path is. So definitely come. Can you come to the Called and Gifted workshop? Yes. Really? Can you come to the Called and Gifted workshop? Yes. All right, so that's at least 75 yeses on my list. I'll get your names as you walk out the door. Okay. I do want to thank the YCP leadership, obviously, for having me tonight. I'm open to whatever questions there are. Anything's on the table. I'm an ICU nurse by training, so nothing shocks me. Right, Mike? Ashton? Yes?
You had mentioned how history of the church was something that helped to convert you or whatever. Do you have any resources or any books that really kind of stood out to help you with that? Because I know a lot of friends who are still Protestant and don't know much about the history of the church.
So books on the history of the church. I don't know, that's a better question probably for David. Books on the history of the church.
There are a few good ones. If you want, I can tell you afterwards.
Just stand up. Sorry, brother-in-law. Here, you want a microphone?
Yeah, if you want, I can give you some information on that. There's a good one by Father Bigmont called Catholic Church Through the Centuries.
He's a theologian. So, but I think this pilgrimages really solidified it for me. And actually, there were some Protestants that were on some of the pilgrimages I were on that I think their significant others brought them because it was the history. And there was conversion on some of the pilgrimages because you can very clearly see the history. But Rogers when I went through basically through the class, it was just him talking. St. Augustine stood out to me because I had heard of St. Augustine before. St. Clement of Rome as well. We'd heard of. If you had studied the Bible or if you had been in any Protestant church in any kind of significant studies, you heard about these saints. And so that's what struck me. It wasn't so much theological, it was more like, oh my goodness, like the connection is all here. So thanks for the question. Other questions? Yeah?
So you touched a little bit on how sometimes nursing is not as pro-life as you would expect. Can you elaborate on that a bit and maybe give an example of a particular instance where your values were challenged and how you handled that?
Yeah, so, the one example I was using was about the Australian and New Zealand nurses would come in. We had a spina bifida kid at the time. So spina bifida, obviously the kids have neurological condition, but they have problems with disabilities, and they actually wanted to cut off the ventilator. They wanted to convince the parents that this patient should not be on the ventilator. And this patient was what we called a frequent flyer in the ICU, so spina bifida kids, heart kids. There's certain kids that have disabilities that come into the ICU because they get some kind of infection or they have some kind of surgery that they need to be in there for. And even though they are obviously in the ICU for a portion of the time, thinking that we can take away their life. So we actually, one of the nurses who had come over from New Zealand, we talked and changed his mind. But the other one, she was still very stout on the fact that it's like we were just wasting medical resources on this kid. But they wanted to talk to parents about taking this kid off. And this kid ended up living, we took care of him for years and years and years, and he'd come in and come out. But that was one example of it. The other example I give you is embryonic stem cell research. So we actually have someone who's the head of our business unit for new product development. And he's a pharmacist by training. And he's a Cuban born and Catholic, and he had been struggling with some of the around embryonic stem cell research. Novartis is a company that does not do embryonic stem cell research, and he's in charge of new product development. And so we basically had it out one day about what really embryonic stem cell research, what that is versus adult stem cells, right? So embryos, obviously, that's a baby, that is a life, and we went through all those different stages, and so he made a decision, and I feel like it has an impact on all of Novartis now, that because we won't be going into that stage, and actually we sold off one of the businesses at Novartis because there was some vaccination that had some embryonic stem cells in it. So that's another example. It's like you never know where you're going to be. He's a very high-level person that happens to be one of my mentors, and he happened to bring this up in a conversation, and I was like, yeah, you can't do that. I will not work for this company. And he was like, what? Because I would have been talking before. He's like, he's mentoring me. I was like, I don't work for this company anymore if you do that. It's like, Amber, what are you talking about? I was like, you're Catholic. How do you not know this? So I went through, obviously I said it nicely, but just good. That's another example of where it's science. We know the science now. This is not, you can see it. So, hopefully that. It happens a lot because people ask opinions from a nursing perspective. No matter what career I am, I'm always be a nurse.
I think you're probably the best person to ask because it's another question, but a lot of talk has been coming up about nursing killing and also through health insurance, it being an alternative to give the patient the lowest cost of care. And a lot of times that is the option to die. And I don't know if you've come across anything along those lines, but how do you see it coming into the medical field and being included in the healthcare that we're going to begin to receive? And this is something that is an option for us now because we live in a secular culture.
Yeah, so the question is basically around mercy killing and how will the healthcare industry influence it. Unfortunately, our problem started with contraception in this country, right? And around the world. That's really, so yes, insurance impacts it, but what I would say what more impacted is contraception, abortion, and the breakdown of the family. So if we really want to heal our culture, if we really want to change the way that we're treating our elderly, the insurance can never force us as if we were a strong culture, right? It can never make us do something like that. I mean, I have seen some families feel more pressure because they feel like it's definitely more noticeable now to them that maybe they're putting undue big costs on the table for their loved ones. And we actually, we had a personal situation in my family that we had a major family argument with my part of the family that's still Protestant calling me too pro-life because we wanted to make sure that we gave proper medical treatment to my grandmother. So it's explaining that about the costs, and also a lot of people don't understand suffering and what it's really for, what is suffering for. So we have to, so I think it's way beyond our healthcare system. I think the same fights are still there. People are still getting the care that they need in the United States. And do not believe the things that you hear on the TV about people not being able to go in ER and get treated, and people even coming from Mexico. I have to tell you, at Santa Rosa Children's, they fly in kids every single day from Mexico to treat them. So those kind of things are still happening today, but I think it's more our society and the world that we live in today. And if we can, to all the men out there, I'm embarrassed what our culture has done to fatherhood. And so we just need, as women, we need to stand up and support you, right? And you guys have to stand up and be the men that you were created to be. Use your gifts. My full answer. And then Mike has a question. Oh, I gave one more question.
Thanks for your presentation, first of all.
Thank you.
Very helpful. I think probably most people here could speak to the idea of it being difficult to be a serious Catholic or serious Christian in almost any profession or industry today. But it seems like your industry, pharmaceuticals, it's especially difficult. I'm just wondering if you've noticed that increase over time since you've been in it, and where do you see it going in the future? Is it going to become more and more difficult to remain a serious Catholic or a serious Christian in the pharmaceutical industry? I'm not asking you specifically about your employer, but the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I think corporate America is, it's cooler to be, to be gay or any other form of diversity besides faith is popular, right? So and actually in my notes it's a little bit, I've actually applied for an employee resource group within the company that I work for to, it's going to be a faith employee resource group. And it's been a challenge. And so I think it's getting worse. And I think it has to do with our overall society. But at the same time, when you get the door shut, you just got to kick it in a little bit more, and in a charitable way. And so that's what I've done. Is little by little, I've just formed coalitions and asked other Christians that are higher up or other people of faith. Like I've been with the Muslim community within Novartis, and we're actually forming this faith ERG together. It's going to be ecumenical because of the fact that they're also bringing their faith to work, and if we don't band together, then it'll be completely off the table. So it is getting more and more difficult, but I think the strategy to go about doing it is just making sure that the people that are Christian, that are Catholic, that do have faith, are talking about it, and it seems to work. And we've got the proposal in right now, so we'll have to see how the rest of the story goes. They said they'll give us a decision in the beginning of January, but they're feeling pretty pressured right now, I would say. So thank you.